Hello, my brother. Welcome to the Great Man Within podcast. Every episode is designed to help you discover and live the great man within you. Today, we are talking about how to access your greatest energy. You know what that's like when you're in your greatest energy. This is when time just slips away. This is when you are performing optimally, where it seems almost effortless, where you are doing things that really only you can seem to do in this particular way. And accessing your greatest energy and knowing what gives you access to your greatest energy is essential to living your purpose in your full potential. You know, for most of my life, I always thought that living my purpose, or that my purpose was something outside of me, was something that was like attributed to a major goal that would take me decades or even a lifetime to accomplish. I had that backwards. And it was only in studying some really wise men and women who came before me who actually taught me that my purpose is not lived in the future. My purpose is lived on the day-to-day. And the way that I can stay connected to my purpose is by understanding what gives me my greatest energy, how to access it, and then live it more and more regularly. Now, this past weekend was the kickoff of the Great Man Mastermind immersion process. If you're not familiar with the Great Man Mastermind, it's a collection of 21 men who are working together with me over the next year to discover and live the great man within them. Brian is one of the anchors of the Great Man Mastermind, helping support and shepherd these guys. And we've been working together for about 2 months now, but this past weekend was our first immersion where we did a couple of deep dives, 4 hours on Friday, 4 hours on Saturday, where these guys really dove into understanding what gives them their greatest energy. Who are they when they're at their best selves? And what are the access points for getting into that greatest energy? Because it's not always like snapping your finger and I'm there. There are certain conditions that need to be met in order for them to access their greatest energy. And so I wanted to have that conversation with you so that you can start attuning your senses to, when am I at my best? What are the things that allow me to get there? One of my favorite books that opened my eyes to all of the different ways that I could access my greatest energy is a book called Stealing Fire by Steven Kotler and Jamie Wheal. Now, both of these men are, I would say, deep students of flow state, right? The book by Mahai Csikszentmihalyi, the scientifically observable process of optimal performance. And there are certain chemicals that are released in the body that basically help to drive that optimal performance. And Stealing Fire's subtitle is How Silicon Valley, the Navy SEALs, and maverick scientists are revolutionizing the way we live and work. Meaning, how do we get into these optimal states of performance so that life becomes easier? And in the book, Steven Kotler and Jamie Wheal reveal this topic of ecstasis. And it's a term that basically describes the art of stepping beyond oneself. Ecstasis is the root word of ecstasy, right? Bliss, joy. If you've ever experienced ecstasy in your life, you know what this feels like. It's a total break from regular, ordinary consciousness. And it feels like you've almost tasted nirvana. So Plato described ecstasis as an altered state where our normal waking consciousness vanishes completely, and it's replaced by an intense euphoria and a powerful connection to a greater intelligence. I think that last piece of the powerful connection to a greater intelligence is the thing that we are after here when we're talking about accessing your greatest energy. So ecstasy is like that state of euphoria and bliss and a powerful connection to greater intelligence. But when we're talking about what gives you your greatest energy, you may not necessarily be experiencing bliss in that moment or ecstasy in that moment because maybe you're working, maybe you're doing something or creating, but you can definitely feel that powerful connection to a greater intelligence. And in the book Stealing Fire, they basically designed the whole book around 3 entry points for ecstasis. The first state is flow state, and I'm going to be honing in my discussion around that arena. The other 2 are contemplative and mystical states. So that's category number 2, contemplative and mystical states like chanting, meditation, dance, sexuality. And then the third category is around psychedelic medicine journeys, which are super powerful. I'm going to be doing a whole series around psychedelic medicines and altered states of consciousness and elevated states of consciousness in the future, as I figure out how to talk about that responsibly, ethically, and powerfully for you. So please know that that's all coming. So if we're talking about flow state, which is the first state for entering ecstasis, in the book Stealing Fire, they give you 4 key characteristics of what flow state feels like. Now, flow state, many of you are probably familiar with, but if you haven't heard that term, it's like being in the zone. It's that state of optimal performance. And 4 key characteristics that Stephen Kotler and Jamie Wheel give are under the acronym of STER, S-T-E-R. Selflessness, timelessness, effortlessness, and richness. So STER, selflessness, is where like the critic, your inner critic, just sits on the sidelines. This is what my chief operating officer, Callie, likes to say. Like, yeah, my critical mind that's always criticizing me or telling me that I'm doing something wrong or not enough or is in fear, that part of me is sitting on the sidelines while I'm now on the field and I'm just engaged in the thing that I'm doing. So you lose the sense of ego. You lose the sense of selflessness. Callie is also a rock climber. So like when she's climbing, it's just her and the rock, right? Like she is no longer separate from the rock. Like she's together with the rock. And you'll hear a lot of elite athletes. Stephen Kotler wrote a book called The Rise of Superman, which is basically a deep dive into the world of extreme sport athletes who have over the last few decades radically transformed performance. You know, about like 30 years ago, there was maybe one man in the world who could surf a 50-foot wave. Now there are thousands. I think like 30 years ago, there was nobody who could do a 720 on a skateboard. And now tens of thousands of people can do that. And like teenage kids can do it. Our bodies haven't evolved that much over that period of time that we could do these superhuman level physical exercises. We're tapping into a mental and emotional state, flow state that allows us to optimize our performance. And so how do we bring that into our everyday creation, everyday work environments? And learning how to access that is super important. But that feeling of selflessness is one of the key characteristics of knowing when you're in that altered state. Timelessness. Time gets distorted. You could be doing something for just a minute and it can feel like an hour. Or you can be doing something for an hour and it could feel like it's a minute. That's another key characteristic of flow state. Effortlessness. Effortlessness doesn't mean it's without effort, but it feels on some level like you're not grinding. You're not emptying your tank. Something feels like it's just of ease. And the ironic part of this is that there needs to be a really, like you have to find that sweet spot between something being way too hard for you that like you just can't do, and then something being too easy for you where you know like 100% success rate. If you can find that little place in between where there's just like enough effort and energy calling for you, that without it being too difficult that you will fail, that is an entry point for effortlessness. And then the final piece of this, richness, is essential to completing that feeling of flow state. Richness means that you have just tapped into something bigger than yourself, something that feels nourishing on a soul level. And without richness, you haven't tapped into this ecstasis state, into this flow state. Because think about it. Selfless, timeless, effortless could be used to describe watching TV, right? Like that's why I love Netflix and binging Breaking Bad episodes. It puts me in a state of selflessness, timelessness, and it's certainly effortless. But I don't get necessarily a sense of richness as a result of that. Video games, gambling, porn, these are all selfless, timeless, effortless, but that sense of richness doesn't necessarily accompany that. When they talk about sexuality, you know, in that contemplative and mystical state of accessing ecstasis, when sexuality meets that criteria, it's the richness of that sexual experience that pops you into that elevated level of flow state, because it's not just like a transactional sexual experience where maybe you're just using another person, or maybe you're just getting off another person, you're not really connected with them. If you've ever had truly connected, deep sex, intimate sex with another person, when you're done, even when you orgasm and ejaculate as a man, which oftentimes puts us in a state of just passing out, something different. You feel something different. You feel more energized, more nourished on your soul level. You don't feel like you've just done something that you regret, or feel something that that just feels like guilty or shameful. You feel like something just elevated. These are all key characteristics of flow state: selfless, timeless, effortless, and richness. One of our recent guests, Ben Aldredge, who did the interview called How to Unlock Your Potential with These 43 Challenges, I believe is expert in accessing these flow states, what gives him his greatest energy. If you haven't listened to that episode, Ben Aldredge was a guy, pretty normal dude, music teacher, who lived a self-described, pretty boring, grayscaled existence until he and his girlfriend came from the UK to the United States to do a road trip together, which went completely awry because he suffered, for the first time in his life, massive panic attacks that were crippling, that wouldn't allow him to leave his hotel room. And when he got back to the UK after that terrible trip, they only got worse. And it was only after he sought counseling and started to read about the Stoics, around how they built their capacity to feel comfortable in the face of adversity by confronting adversity, did he start to recognize what allowed him access to his greatest energy. So he built what was called the Year of Adversity, where he took on 43 challenges like learning how to pick a lock, learning how to solve a Rubik's Cube in under a minute, eating crickets, summiting. He didn't actually summit Mount Everest, but he climbed the equivalent of Mount Everest in his apartment staircase, going up and down, I think like 4,000 times, running a marathon in his 26-foot backyard, which took him thousands of shuttles. You know, what he did was he wanted to confront what gave him feelings of anxiousness, while at the same time tapping into the things that energized him, for no other reason than to become expert at understanding what gave him access to his greatest energy. And since that episode has aired, I've heard from a number of you who have reached out to me saying that you are so inspired by Ben that you've created your own challenges to give you access to your greatest energy. Dan Hess, who's a friend of mine, who's a man that I used to manage when I was at Prudential Retirement. He's still a salesperson there, very successful dude. He decided to take on a 72-hour fast, or like directly after listening to the episode, because Dan is a champion of his own physical well-being. And he wanted to do this fast because he'd never done something like that for 72 hours to see what it would do to clean out his system, what it would do for his mental state of being, what it would feel like after 72 hours. Mike Courcey, who's my best friend and brother since childhood, like he's the longest friend, like he's the guy that I've known since my memory, like as far as my memory goes back, basically. And he couldn't explain why. He said, after I listened to that episode, I've just always wanted to learn how to juggle. So I went on Amazon, I bought juggling balls, I watched some how-to videos, and he just sent me a video clip of him this morning, like where he can juggle 3 balls for like 20 or 30 seconds already after only 1 week of doing this. And I remember him saying to me, kind of sheepishly, yeah, I want to learn how to juggle. I can't exactly tell you why. And I said, you don't need a fucking reason, man. You don't need a reason. The only reason is that it's interesting to you. And if you go down that path, you will inevitably find a spark that will help you to wake up to these other areas of your life, more sparks of interest that allow you to access your greatest energy. And where too many men get sidetracked is if you can't see right from the get-go how this thing that you're going to invest your time in, how it feeds your business or your financial situation or your family life, if you don't see directly, then you're like, oh, I can't do that. No, the answer is if it gives you energy and it puts you in a place of selflessness, timelessness, effortlessness as you're learning how to become effortless in the pursuit of that work, and a sense of richness, then that's the only criteria that need to be met for you to access your greatest energy. And when you become expert at tapping into, stepping into, and living more of your life around your greatest energy, living your purpose is inevitable, at least from my own experience of living. So my challenge to you is to get curious about what it is. Become fascinated by the things that give you your greatest energy, even if they may seem trivial to you. like Mike's juggling seemed trivial to him, but I can guarantee you if he keeps going down that path, like Ben Aldredge went down his path and picked up 43 different activities that may seem trivial to most others, but to him it gave him energy. Now Ben is living a life that most other people would say, dude, you're like Jason Bourne. Like, you are a fascinating dude. Everyone has the opportunity to do that and create that for themselves if you're willing to get curious about what gives you your greatest energy. I want to give a shout out to Eric S.A., who left us this glowing 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Eric says, I have been using podcasts rather than listening to music as my workout audio for well over a year now, and I've run through a good number of podcasts. I've not listened to every episode from Dominic and Brian. And by the way, Eric, if you have, that would be 127, I think, episodes, so that would be quite an accomplishment. But I have listened to many and have a number of podcasts with which to compare them. I find their choices of topic, the quality and energy of their interviews, and their growth in both areas to be inspiring and fulfilling. I very much enjoy their conversations, especially the shorter ones that Dominic has been doing solely recently during COVID, but also the resources and directions to which they point. They are aiding me greatly in my journey as I work toward greater fulfillment and service to humanity, and I encourage others to add them to their mix of podcasts. Eric, thank you so much, my friend. As these testimonials come in, it helps other men find this path to say that we are worth listening to. So if you have been waiting to share your love and to point another man to listening to this particular podcast, I encourage you to go on Apple Podcasts and to leave a rating and review. Thank you so much for all of you who have already done so as we continue to reach out to others who can discover and live the great man within them.